Hello, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today. What we're going to be looking at today is the guidance that the FDA put out. But what we're looking for is using the FDA's guidance for how the FDA tells us that they want us to move through the use of these electronic health records. As we will discuss, one of the concerns that we've come across is that historically, when the FDA has put up guidance for us, they either are very confident in what we're doing in clinical research and what we are able to achieve or how we're there, or they are maybe not necessarily in touch with where we are. We have had a lot of guidance documents kind of get ahead of us in terms of electronic health records, electronic consent, electronic source, and electronic systems. So we want to make sure that we are aware of what the FDA is telling us and to the best of our ability meet those expectations. Guidance documents, of course, are not legally binding, but it is how the FDA, how they're interpreting the regulations, how they're seeing things within the industry and expecting us to respond. So we know that different systems, different institutions use different types of health record systems. Some electronic systems are better than others. Some truly are controlled systems. Some are still using paper documents that are scanned into an electronic system. So we're going to talk about the use of these electronic health record data in clinical investigations and how we use that information. So this is looking at the slides that you have. Look at the draft guidance. I wanted you to be aware that that came out. As you'll see here, this was in 2016 that we saw this draft guidance come out, May of 2016. And then we have the final guidance that came out in 2018. So obviously, we're going to work off the final guidance, but to be aware that the FDA was asking questions, right? They put out that draft guidance, they ask for feedback, and then take all that into consideration. So our objectives are still going to be the same. We're going to look at the responsibilities and processes for assessing the validity, reliability, and integrity of electronic health record source data. So when we marry this with the FDA's other guidance for electronic records, electronic source, computerized systems validation, electronic records and signatures used in clinical research. Are you guys familiar with those different guidance documents? Give me a green check if so, please. We have validation, electronic records and signatures. Okay, perfect. So we are looking at these guidance documents as a whole, taking them together. So we're going to talk about the FDA's intentions on how they're going to approach electronic health records to assess compliance with 21 CFR 11. Now, years ago, the FDA said, we're not going to cite you to 21 CFR 11 for electronic records and signatures. We're going to cite you for, to 312 or 812 is what we have seen in the warning letters, for failure to maintaining adequate and accurate records. But we see now the expectation is we're coming together and working to make sure we're getting that credible and verifiable data. We had guidance from several years ago where the FDA mentioned, too, with electronic source, it's really not the sponsor's purview for selecting the electronic health records because those are typically what we see at the vendor sites, at the investigator sites, maybe at the clinic. But we know that there are many cases where the sponsor is going to have direct input in, what systems are going to be used. We see this at VA hospitals, for example. We see this at other institutions where we're working within a more confined setup in terms of who has access to what. We'll look at the best practices for using electronic health records in clinical research. We'll talk about interoperability, and we will challenge me to say that like 9 million times, interoperability in electronic health record use. And we're going to talk about the impact on recommendations for research that's conducted outside the U.S. So I do a lot of work outside the U.S., particularly in resource-restricted areas. It's interesting. You go places like Mali, and you see where they have these systems in place. There have been initiatives, Baobab Health, for example, to work on systems that are user-friendly and in some cases more advanced than what we see here in the States. So we can't discount those. We can learn from everyone.